Hi everyone, Mafari here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. Peace and blessings to the people. How's it going, everyone? Mafari here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. I am hoping that you've had a blessed week and that the weather is accommodating wherever you are located across the globe. I know that North America has been having it pretty rough with that winter storm that's been kicking in. And I know down here in the South, we've had I think it's called the El Nino, or it's the other one, the La Nina. So we've had a lot of thunder showers and rain and everything. And it's just been the whole weather thing has just been off. So and I just actually wanted to ask on that note if any of you are gardeners or you happen to grow your own produce, because I was thinking of doing maybe a gardening podcast series. I was thinking it may be useful, and it's a practical hands-on skill that everyone could apply in their daily, activities in their lives. So, let me know if any of you do that and you have any recommendations. And the other thing is the Skype interviews are now set up. So if any of you want to do video Skype interviews or podcasts where we do in-person, we have in-person interaction via camera. Digital in-person interaction, for better choice of words. And let me know if you guys are interested in doing that. But let's just hop straight into it. So in this episode of Retrospect, I'll be talking about X-Men Origins, specifically Wolverine. So it's not the X-Men franchise, it's the Wolverine spin-off franchise that is part of the X-Men universe, but these are his three separate individual movies. And so Wolverine is pretty a raw character in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. His life has been it's been a tough journey. For those of you that have watched the movie, it's pretty old now, so I'm assuming most of you have at least watched X-Men Origins or even Logan. That was the most recent one, and that one was really, really, really good. It had a lot of great reviews. I don't even know if it was nominated for an Oscar. It was a really good movie. And so, Wolverine is one of those characters that is just, he's like a symbol of a primal force in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. His powers are very animal-like, hence the name Wolverine. And but more importantly, it's actually just his character story, his background, his origin. And what he's kind of journey, well, at least in the movies, what they portray as his journey, right? And so, of all the Marvel cinematic movies, this one really was. It was pretty intense. It was actually pretty intense because you get a first-hand look into how much of a bloody and gory and I guess very savage life story of a character. And Hugh Jackman's a great actor, and he portrayed the character very well. But really what was amazing about it was just how it kind of was symbolic of how like an animal's journey goes, and how humans tend to treat animals as well. And it's funny that he happens to be a human with very animal-like traits, and so he gets treated like one. And in a lot of the movies, so his powers are basically he has before he had these bone claws, which are retractable, and so they would every time he contracted his knuckles, these bone claws would like literally cut out of his skin, and they were pretty strong, and he could cut people with it. He could do anything with it, and so he was born with these powers. And so all these in the X-Men universe, these kids will have these genetic predispositions or mutations that grant them these obscene powers. Some very, 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 very extremely powerful, others very moderate. And so Wolverine, what I liked about him, similar to Spider-Man, he was kind of in between. He had the most unique ability that he did have was self-regeneration. So he could be injured and he could literally regenerate instantly. And so in a way, he had some form of immortality because he couldn't technically die. And so he had these retractable claws, and he had this regenerative factor. That's a proper term for it. And yeah, and so he was born in the movies. At least they take it off in the early 1700s, so 16, where they were having the revolution. I think they had the revolution, and then straight after that, him and his brother lived. His brother's also a mutant with similar powers, except he has really sharp nails. They call him Sabertooth. So he's literally like a saber-toothed tiger, but he's like a humanoid version of it. It's obscene strength. And so both of him and his brother have had these powers. They lost their family very early on because they were considered outcasts. And so him and his brother ran away, and they formed a bond. And the bond was essentially to always have each other's back no matter what. And so because of their prolific fighting abilities, they fought through basically every single major war that mankind has ever experienced. And that was what I really found pretty cool about the movie, is how they portrayed their experience of all those things and the evolution of their psyche throughout all of those. So, like I said, they fought in the American Revolution, then they fought in World War One, and then they fought in World War Two, and then they fought in Vietnam. And through all of it, you see how they get hardened. The experience of war basically really, really hardens their character, and to a certain point, it reveals a lot about their inner state of mind, right? Logan, who's Wolverine, that's his name, Logan. He has a very, a stoic attitude, but he has a certain conservational side to him. He has a certain threshold of violence that he'll tolerate, and then a certain threshold that he simply will not. Whereas his brother Sabertooth simply just has a insatiable bloodlust, and I think most of it spans from his powers. So over the course of time, you see in his journey, as they're fighting through these wars, him and his brother grow further distant, because it gets to a point actually where his brother is actually just killing people for the sake of it, because in his eyes he's becoming this apex predator, whereas for Logan, he's starting to see that this way of life is just not conducive to him, and it's not even conducive to him and his brother's connection to one another. And so you have to watch the movies, and I'll cut the story short, but they had a falling out. They both went their own separate ways, and so Logan was actually invited for a genetic experiment by the military, obviously, and what they did is they injected his body with this metal called adamantium. And adamantium is supposed to be close to this metal called vibranium. For those of you that will watch Black Panther, vibranium's that metal that's nearly indestructible. So yeah, they imbued his skeletal structure with that liquid metal of adamantium, and yeah, it gave him, I mentioned he has his retractable claws, and then they became adamantium retractable claws. And so yeah, he was pretty OP, man. He was like a killing machine at that point in time. And so what was interesting about the whole Wolverine franchise is how humanity turns things into instruments of war, right? For Logan, he literally, his animal-like nature was just something that, how we typically treat something that has killing power. We hone it, we sharpen it, and we just utilize it to essentially inflict as much harm upon others as we can. And so, Logan was indoctrinated into that. Wolverine was indoctrinated into being a killing machine. And like I said, he fought through basically almost every major war that mankind had ever seen, and he was really good at what he did. Not only that, he was subjugated to these experiments that turned him even into more of a killing machine. And what was unique was that it shows that regardless of how you are conditioned, how animals are conditioned, they still retain a sense of inner sovereignty, meaning that some things that nature will simply not allow, right? And what I like about Wolverine was that in his inherent nature, he was actually a seeker of solace and peace, like most animals do. We see these things like tigers and all these ferocious cats, bears. Yes, they hunt and they kill because it's within their nature, but they don't actively seek to consistently do it. It's not in an extreme sense. It's balanced by nature. Whereas in Wolverine, they take that animal nature and they try to take it to the extreme. And so it's amazing that even throughout all those things, he still his his true natural side, like his true inner nature, fought essentially for personal freedom. And if you see his evolution throughout the first movie is his origin story. It talks about him, his relationship with his brother, his family, how he got his powers. The second one's actually amazing because it's his involvement in like I said, he fought in World War II, and he was there when the bombing of Nagasaki happened. So, I mean, for a person, I know he's not the most intellectual character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for those of you that do watch it, but he's, you get people who are just intelligent because they've experienced it, they've seen it, they don't have any theories, they just know the rawness, and they know the nitty-gritty of it. And I think so I mean, coming back to it, he was there when the dropping of the bomb happened, and he actually saved someone's life who ended up becoming a villain, ironically enough. And and then in the third movie, for those of you that watch Logan, it's basically him in his old age, in quotation mark, and it's a very deep movie. It's a very intense movie because it's like a summary of his life. And I'm not gonna spoil the movie for you and everything, but the whole three movies really do kind of summarize the journey of life for a person who was just an animal, by nature. And he had to go through this life and this path because of his nature, and he could never find what he truly longed for, which was just peace and solace, solitude, to be by himself, right? And you can see that in his character in the movies. He's a very stoic person. He has a beard and everything, lumberjack type dude, always swearing. People say hi, he says fuck off. Typical alpha male behavior. But what's more unique about it is actually just how sometimes you have nature that just wants to be left at its to be at peace, right? And not to be tainted and manipulated by mankind consistently. And Wolverine is that aspect, and he says something interesting in the third movie. He says, don't be what they make you, right? And it's interesting because for him, they tried to turn his animal nature into a killing machine. And so, even despite all the artificial attempts by man to distort an animal's nature, the inner animal, the true animal, which is in tune with nature and is truest, still refuses and will never compromise or yield to that. And I think in the animal kingdom, we're not animals entirely because we're consciousness, but in our most basic sense, we are animals by nature. In our most fundamental, our bodies, our physiology, we have our tendencies. We do animal-like things. We just do it in a much more sophisticated way. But I think what you can really take from that movie is to always investigate your inner nature and recognize that it's also in tune with its own knowing, with its own knowledge, and that you don't have to artificially manipulate yourself to be something, to be this, I don't want to use the word machine, but something that is just completely disenchanted with nature. And so I know it was kind of like a tangent and everything, and I didn't really get to go into, his abilities, some of the villains he fought and everything. But you should check it out. You should check the first one. The first one is Origins. It investigates his origin story, his life, what happened and everything. And then you should also check out the X-Men, the Wolverine, that's what they call it, and that revolves around him and being in Japan and everything, which is really, really cool. It wasn't the best movie, but I guess, for the most part, the story was actually very interesting. But you have to watch Logan. Logan was a very touching movie because, it was a real journey, man. I think you only really appreciate what he went through as and he's not really like a hero, he's actually his own person, Yes, he's an X-Men, but sometimes he's not an X-Men. Sometimes he's doing his own thing. Sometimes he wants to be left alone. Sometimes he's a villain. Sometimes he's just an animal that's on a killing streak. And so the rawness in Wolverine was what was really good. It was just it was nature at its finest, man. But really, also just it shows you how it's like a very interesting journey of a man coming to terms with his animal nature, but his own, I guess, conscious being as well, and bringing those two things together and having to come to peace with everything, right? So it was a really good movie series. I mean, I don't know if it's done now. And so, yeah, you just have to watch those 3 movies. The musical score for most of them were average, to say the very least. But I guess the story is really good. And the acting by Hugh Jackman is a perfect portrayal for Wolverine. I don't think there can be anyone else on this planet to do it better. And you should just check it out. It's a really good movie. All of them are good movies. They have very good cast, really, really good cast. And it's not overwhelming. A lot of these sci-fi movies can be visually overwhelming for most people, but this one is really solid. So I recommend that you check it out. And again, just letting you know that we'll be moving on to the Water podcast series next week. And also, if any of you are gardeners or growers, or you are into any of that stuff, just hit me up and let me know. And also, if you want to do a Skype interview, or if you want to talk about something, I don't have a major, there won't be like many people listening to it, so you don't need to be so anxious. And yeah, just it'll be pretty cool to just talk to some of you. So peace and blessings to the people. Thank you.